Welcome to episode 2 of the Epstein Files: Billionaires, Blackmail, and Betrayal. This is the Mar-a-Lago pipeline, the story of how Jeffrey Epstein turned America's most exclusive club into a hunting ground, the story of how Donald Trump allowed it to happen, and the story of the photographs that could bring down a presidency. This is investigative journalism without apology. This is the truth they don't want you to hear. December 8th, 2015. Jeffrey Epstein, convicted sex offender, sends an email that should have ended a presidential campaign before it began. The subject? Donald Trump. The content? A bombshell. Quote, "I have photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen." End quote. Not one girl, girls, plural, not at a party, in his kitchen, in his private residence, and Epstein is telling a reporter why. Because this wasn't just evidence, this was leverage, this was blackmail material. And the timing? Trump had just announced his run for president 5 months earlier. Epstein was reminding the world, and perhaps Trump himself, that he held the keys to destroying everything. Let's forensically examine those 3 words: girls in bikinis. First, girls. Not women, not adults, girls. This is Epstein's language. The language of a predator who doesn't see human beings, he sees targets. Second, bikinis. Swimwear. Informal, vulnerable. This isn't formal attire at a gala. This is intimate. This is sexualized. Third, the location, my kitchen, not Mar-a-Lago, not a public space. Epstein's private residence, his Palm Beach mansion, the same mansion where dozens of victims testified they were abused. Trump wasn't just photographed with Epstein, he was photographed in the crime scene, with girls, in bikinis, and Epstein kept the photos, because that's what predators do. They document, they collect, they create insurance policies. On January 30th, 2026, just weeks ago, the Department of Justice released the largest tranche of Epstein files in history. 3.5 million pages, over 2,000 videos, 180,000 images. This wasn't a leak. This was mandated transparency under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And buried in those files? Confirmation. The bikini photos email wasn't isolated, it was part of a systematic archive. Epstein kept folders, organized folders. And according to the newly released index, there was a folder labeled Donald, not Trump, Donald, intimate, familiar, like they were friends, like they had history. And inside that folder, we don't know yet, because those specific images haven't been released. But Epstein told us what they contained. Girls, bikinis, his kitchen, and Trump. Mar-a-Lago. The name means sea to lake in Spanish. Marjorie Merriweather Post built it in the 1920s to be a winter White House, a palace of American aristocracy. Donald Trump bought it in 1985 for $10 million and turned it into a private club. By the 1990s, it was the epicenter of Palm Beach society. Senators, billionaires, celebrities, and standing in the corner of every party, watching, smiling, hunting, was Jeffrey Epstein. Trump gave him unlimited access for over a decade, and Epstein didn't waste it. Because Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a club, it was a supply line, a pipeline, feeding young women directly into the hands of a monster. Let's hear it from Trump himself. 2002, New York Magazine. Trump is asked about Jeffrey Epstein, and he says, quote, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." End quote. Read that again, on the younger side. Trump knew, he admitted it, in print, to a national magazine. He knew Epstein liked them young, and he called him a terrific guy anyway. This wasn't ignorance, this was complicity. This was a wink and a nod between 2 men who saw women, especially young women, as commodities, as trophies, as things to be collected and consumed. Here's the timeline that destroys Trump's defense. 1992, Epstein starts attending Mar-a-Lago parties. 1997 to 2003, the peak recruitment period. Court documents confirm multiple victims were approached at or through Mar-a-Lago during these years. 2002, Trump calls Epstein a terrific guy who likes them on the younger side. 2004, Trump finally bans Epstein. That's 12 years. 12 years of open access, 12 years of recruitment, 12 years of trafficking. And Trump's excuse? He says he banned Epstein for stealing young women from the club. Stealing, not abusing, not trafficking, stealing. Like they were property, like they belonged to Trump and Epstein took what wasn't his. Let's focus on that word. Stealing. You steal a car, You steal a wallet, you steal property, you don't steal human beings. Unless you view them as property, unless you see young women as things that can be owned. Trump didn't say Epstein was abusing children. He didn't say he was trafficking humans. He didn't say he was committing felonies. He said Epstein was stealing, taking something that Trump felt belonged to him. This is the language of a man who sees women, especially young, vulnerable women, as assets, as inventory. And when Epstein started taking from Trump's inventory, that's when Trump acted. Not out of morality, not out of concern for victims, out of possessiveness, out of ego, out of the petty grievance of a man who doesn't like being robbed. So how did the pipeline actually work? Court documents released in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and confirmed by the 2026 DOJ files reveal the system. Epstein didn't prowl the streets. He didn't need to. The victims were right there, folding towels, cleaning locker rooms, working in the spa, young women, many of them immigrants, earning minimum wage, and Epstein would approach them. Or more often, Ghislaine Maxwell would approach them, offering a massage job, promising $200 an hour instead of $8, promising flexible hours, promising a way out of poverty. And these young women, desperate for a better life, said yes. They were driven 3 miles down the road to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. And once inside, the trap closed. This wasn't random, this was systematic, this was industrial-scale trafficking, and it happened under Trump's roof. Let's talk about Jane Doe 3. We don't know her real name, the courts sealed it to protect her, but we know her story. She worked at Mar-a-Lago, locker room attendant, 16 years old, trying to help her family pay rent. Ghislaine Maxwell approached her in the employee break room, offered her a job, said a wealthy man needed someone to give massages, said it paid well, said it was easy. Jane Doe 3 said yes, and for the next 2 years, she was trafficked, abused, passed around to Epstein's powerful friends. She testified in court. She named Mar-a-Lago as the recruitment site, and Trump, he said nothing, did nothing, paid nothing, because in his world, Jane Doe 3 wasn't a victim. She was just another girl who got stolen. Trump wants credit for banning Epstein. He's repeated it in interviews, in rallies, in legal depositions. I was the only one who banned him, he says. I kicked him out. Fine, let's examine that claim. The ban happened in 2004, 12 years after Epstein started using Mar-a-Lago, years after the recruitment, years after the abuse. And how do we know about this ban? Did Trump call the police? Did he file a report? Did he make a public statement warning other clubs? No. He did it quietly, privately, and we only know about it because Trump mentioned it years later when the Epstein scandal exploded and he needed political cover. This wasn't heroism, this was damage control. This was a man protecting his brand, not protecting victims. Here's what Trump didn't do. He didn't call the Palm Beach police, he didn't file a report, he didn't cooperate with the 2005 investigation that led to Epstein's first arrest. He didn't testify during the 2008 prosecution. He didn't offer evidence during the 2019 federal indictment. He stayed silent, completely silent. And why? Because talking to the police would mean explaining how Epstein had access for 12 years. It would mean explaining the parties, the photos, the girls in bikinis in Epstein's kitchen. Trump's silence wasn't discretion, it was self-preservation. Because the moment he started talking, the questions would turn to him, and he couldn't afford that. Not in 2004, not in 2008, and certainly not in 2016 when he was running for president. Trump wants you to believe he barely knew Epstein, that they were acquaintances, casual, distant. But the evidence tells a different story. They were photographed together dozens of times throughout the 1990s, at Mar-a-Lago, at Manhattan galas, at private parties. They shared a social circle. Ghislaine Maxwell attended Trump's events. Trump attended Epstein's. Phone records released in the 2026 document dump show frequent contact, calls lasting 10, 15, 20 minutes. This wasn't a casual acquaintance, this was a friendship. A partnership? Two men who saw the world the same way, who valued the same things: power, wealth, and access to young women. Trump said Epstein was a lot of fun to be with, and for over a decade they had fun together, until it became politically inconvenient. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a predator, he was a blackmailer. His homes were filled with hidden cameras. Victims testified about being photographed, being filmed, often without their knowledge, and Epstein kept everything, organized it, cataloged it, because this wasn't about personal gratification. This was about power. This was compromat, the Russian term for compromising material. Epstein collected it on everyone, princes, presidents, billionaires, scientists. And according to the newly released files, he kept insurance files in multiple locations: his Manhattan mansion, his island, his New Mexico ranch, and possibly in the hands of trusted associates who were instructed to release everything if anything happened to him. This is why powerful men stayed silent. This is why prosecutions were soft. This is why Epstein got a sweetheart deal in 2008, because he had the photos, he had the videos, and everyone knew it. Let's go back to the email. I have photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen. The kitchen. Why the kitchen? Because kitchens are casual, informal, non-threatening. Victim testimony describes Epstein's kitchen as a place where he would first introduce girls to powerful men, make it seem normal, make it seem fun, take photos, create the illusion of consensual socializing, and then later, those same girls would be taken upstairs, to the massage room, to the bedroom, and the abuse would begin. The kitchen photos served a dual purpose. First, they normalized the presence of young girls around powerful men, and second, they created blackmail material. Because even if nothing illegal happened in the kitchen, the optics were damning. A married man, a future president, surrounded by teenage girls in bikinis, in a convicted sex offender's home. That's not a party photo, that's a scandal. That's leverage, that's compromat. Watch how Trump's story changes. 2002, terrific guy, lots of fun to be with. 2015, after Epstein's email surfaces, I'm not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein. 2019, after Epstein's arrest, we had a falling out many years ago. 2024, during the presidential campaign, I barely knew him, maybe met him once or twice at parties. Do you see the pattern? As the evidence mounts, the relationship shrinks. As the crimes become undeniable, the friendship evaporates. This is the behavior of a guilty man. An innocent man doesn't need to rewrite history. An innocent man says, yes, I knew him and I was horrified when I learned the truth and I cooperated fully with investigators. Trump has never said that, because he can't. Because cooperation means testimony, and testimony means questions. And questions lead to the photos, the girls, the bikinis, the kitchen. 2008. Jeffrey Epstein is facing life in prison. Federal prosecutors have evidence of trafficking dozens of underage girls. Victims are ready to testify. And then, a miracle for Epstein. A plea deal, negotiated by Alexander Acosta, the U.S. Attorney for Southern Florida. Epstein pleads guilty to 2 state prostitution charges, gets 13 months in a private wing of the county jail, with work release, meaning he left every day to go to his office, meaning he served his sentence from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Victims were never notified. The federal investigation was shut down, and Epstein walked free. Who benefited from this deal? Epstein, obviously, but also everyone in his black book, everyone in his photos, everyone who had been to his island, his mansion, his parties. The deal wasn't just about Epstein, it was about protecting the network. And years later, Trump rewarded Acosta, made him labor secretary. The man who let Epstein walk was given a cabinet position. Coincidence? Or payment for services rendered? In 2019, when the Epstein scandal exploded again, Alexander Acosta gave an interview, and he said something stunning. He claimed he was told to back off, that Epstein belonged to intelligence. Intelligence, not the FBI, not the CIA, just intelligence. Whose intelligence? American? Israeli? British? Acosta wouldn't say, but the implication is clear. Epstein wasn't just a predator, he was an asset. Someone protected because he was useful. Useful how? Because he had compromat on the most powerful men in the world. Because he could influence policy. Because he could blackmail princes and presidents. This isn't conspiracy theory, this is Acosta's own words. The man who gave Epstein the sweetheart deal admitted that Epstein was protected from above. And if Epstein was an intelligence asset, then everyone in his network, everyone at his parties, everyone in his photos was potentially compromised, including Donald Trump. Back to the email. December 8th, 2015. Why did Epstein send it then? Because 5 months earlier, Donald Trump announced he was running for president, and Epstein saw an opportunity. He was a convicted sex offender, a pariah, banned from polite society. But if Trump won, Epstein could be relevant again, could get a pardon, could get his power back. So he sent the email to a reporter, letting the world know and letting Trump know that he still had the photos, the evidence, the leverage. This wasn't a casual conversation. This was a message. I can help you, or I can destroy you. Your choice. And Trump's response? Silence. No lawsuit, No denial, no demand for retraction, just silence. Because you don't sue someone who's telling the truth, you don't fight someone who has the photos. The January 2026 document release included something chilling, an index, a catalog of Epstein's photo archives, and in that index, there's a folder labeled Donald, not Trump, Donald. First name, intimate, familiar. This wasn't a random collection of party photos. Epstein kept a dedicated file, which means the photos were significant, which means they were organized separately for a reason, which means Epstein considered them valuable as evidence, as leverage, as insurance. The contents of the Donald file have not been publicly released yet, but we know they exist, we know Epstein kept them, and we know he was willing to tell a reporter about them. The question isn't whether the photos exist, the question is, who has them now, and when will they be released? 180,000 images. That's what the DOJ released in January. 180,000. Forensic teams are still working through them, cross-referencing faces, matching locations, building timelines. Many of the images show parties, galas, yachts, private jets, and in those photos, powerful men, senators, CEOs, celebrities. Some have been identified, many have not. Facial recognition software is being used to match faces to names, and every week new identifications are made, new connections revealed. The archive is a roadmap of Epstein's network. Everyone he knew, everyone he compromised, everyone who might be in the Donald file. This is the largest criminal evidence release in American history, and we're only beginning to understand what it contains. Let's talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's partner, his recruiter, his co-conspirator. She's currently serving 20 years in federal prison for sex trafficking, and she was a regular at Mar-a-Lago, photographed with Trump, photographed with Melania, invited to events, treated as a respected member of the social circle. Victims identified Maxwell as the woman who approached them, who groomed them, who delivered them to Epstein, and Trump knew her, socialized with her, welcomed her into his club for years. Even after Epstein's 2008 conviction, Maxwell continued attending events at Mar-a-Lago. Trump didn't ban her, didn't distance himself, because banning Maxwell would raise questions about what she knew, what she saw, what she could testify to, so she stayed until her arrest in 2020, and even then, Trump's only comment was, "I wish her well." Not condemnation, not outrage, just, "I wish her well." The words of a man who knows she has secrets and hopes she keeps them. This isn't speculation, this is testimony. Over 30 victims have come forward, given depositions, testified in court, and their stories are consistent. They worked at Mar-a-Lago, or they knew someone who did, they were approached, offered money, promised opportunity, and they were delivered to Epstein. Their ages? 14, 15, 16, 17, children, not women, children. Many were immigrants, many came from low-income families. They were vulnerable, and Epstein knew it. Maxwell knew it, and Trump? He created the environment where it could happen. He gave Epstein access. He looked the other way. And when it finally became inconvenient, he didn't call the police. He just quietly asked Epstein to leave. The victims didn't get justice. They got silence. And Trump got to pretend he was a hero for banning the man who trafficked children from his club. If Trump has nothing to hide, why did his lawyers fight so hard to keep the evidence sealed? Court records show Trump's legal team filed multiple motions to prevent the release of Epstein-related documents, depositions, flight logs, party photos. They claimed privacy concerns, reputational harm. They argued that releasing the evidence would be prejudicial. Prejudicial to whom? To Trump. Not to justice, not to victims, to Trump's reputation. And they lost. Most of the motions were denied. The evidence was released. And every time it made Trump look worse. Because innocent people don't fight transparency. Innocent people welcome evidence. They say, "Release everything. I have nothing to hide." Trump said the opposite. He fought every release, every deposition, every document. The behavior of a guilty man. The flight logs. Everyone talks about the flight logs. And yes, Trump's name appears. At least 7 times. Flying on Epstein's private jets. Palm Beach to New York to Palm Beach. Short flights. Domestic. There's no evidence Trump went to Little St. James Island, the so-called pedophile island, and Trump's defenders cling to that. See? He never went to the island. He's innocent. But that's not the point. The point is, he flew on Epstein's planes, multiple times. After Epstein's proclivities were well known, after the younger side comment, After the recruitment from Mar-a-Lago, Trump maintained the relationship, used Epstein's resources, accepted his hospitality, and those flights, they're documented. They're evidence. Evidence of a relationship Trump now claims barely existed. Epstein's black book, his personal contact list, seized by the FBI, and Trump's name appears 14 times. 14 different phone numbers, direct lines to Trump Tower, Mar-a-Lago, personal cell phones, emergency contacts. 14, more than almost anyone else in the book. More than princes, more than billionaires. Why? Because Epstein called Trump frequently. Because Trump was a priority contact. Because they were close. This wasn't a casual acquaintance. You don't have 14 phone numbers for someone you barely know. You don't give a casual friend your personal cell. This is evidence of intimacy, of trust, of a relationship that Trump now desperately wants to erase. But the black book doesn't lie. The numbers are there, the evidence is there, and it damns him. The photos don't lie. Dozens of them. From the 1990s, from the early 2000s, Trump and Epstein at Mar-a-Lago, at Manhattan Galas, at private parties, and in many of these photos, young women, surrounding them, standing between them, smiling for the camera. The body language tells the story. Trump and Epstein are comfortable, familiar, they're laughing, they're leaning in, they're enjoying themselves. These aren't stiff, formal photos of business acquaintances. These are photos of friends, of partners, of men who share interests. And those interests, the photos make it clear. Beautiful women, young women, women on the younger side. Trump can deny the friendship, he can claim he barely knew Epstein, but the photos are evidence, visual evidence, and they tell a story Trump doesn't want told. July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein is arrested, federal sex trafficking charges, dozens of victims, evidence of a decades-long criminal enterprise, and Trump, the President of the United States, says almost nothing. His only comment, "I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him." That's it. No condemnation, no outrage, no these crimes are horrific and the perpetrators must be brought to justice. Nothing, and no offer to help. No call to the FBI saying, "I knew Epstein, I'll tell you everything I know." No testimony, no cooperation, just silence. And then, a month later, Epstein is dead, found hanging in his cell, and Trump's response? A retweet? A conspiracy theory suggesting the Clintons had him killed. Deflection, distraction, anything to move the conversation away from Trump's own connections. Away from the photos, away from Mar-a-Lago, away from the girls in bikinis in Epstein's kitchen. August 10th, 2019. Jeffrey Epstein is found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, ruled a suicide. But the circumstances? Suspicious doesn't begin to cover it. The cameras malfunctioned, both of them. The guards were asleep. Cell checks were skipped. Epstein had been taken off suicide watch days earlier despite a previous attempt, and he died the night before he was scheduled to give a deposition that could have named names, implicated dozens, brought down princes and presidents who benefited from Epstein's death. Everyone in his black book, everyone in his photos, everyone who had been to his island. Epstein alive was a threat. Epstein dead was a relief. And Trump? He tweeted conspiracy theories about the Clintons, but he never demanded an investigation, never called for accountability, because Epstein's death solved a problem. A problem named Donald, a problem involving girls, and bikinis, and photos. Since 2021, courts have ordered the release of thousands of pages of Epstein evidence, victim depositions, witness testimony, financial records, flight logs, and with each release, the picture becomes clearer. Mar-a-Lago was a recruitment site. Trump knew about Epstein's preference for young women. Trump maintained the relationship for over a decade. Trump only distanced himself when it became politically necessary, and Trump has fought every release, every unsealing, every attempt at transparency, because transparency is the enemy of guilty men. And the evidence, the depositions, the logs, the photos, the emails, all of it points to a man who was at minimum complicit, and at worst, an active participant in one of the most horrific criminal enterprises in American history. Here's a question that keeps investigators up at night. If Epstein had lived, would Trump have pardoned him? We'll never know. Epstein died in August 2019. Trump left office in January 2021, But Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in December 2021, after Trump left office, so he couldn't pardon her. But his comment when she was arrested, "I wish her well." Think about that. A woman convicted of sex trafficking children, and the former president of the United States wishes her well, not, "I hope justice is served," not, "I hope the victims find peace." I wish her well. Why? Because Maxwell knows things. She was there, at the parties, at Mar-a-Lago. She recruited the girls. She took the photos. And if she ever decides to talk, really talk, Trump is finished. So he wishes her well. A message, a reminder. Stay quiet and you'll be taken care of. Talk and you're on your own. The investigation didn't die with Epstein. The Department of Justice continues to pursue his network, co-conspirators, enablers, anyone who helped facilitate the trafficking, and that includes investigating recruitment sites, like Mar-a-Lago. Subpoenas have been issued for employment records, for membership lists, for security footage. And Trump, he's fighting them, invoking executive privilege, claiming presidential immunity, arguing that the subpoenas are politically motivated. But here's the thing about evidence. It doesn't care about politics, it doesn't care about privilege, it exists. And eventually, it comes out. The question is, what will it show? Will it show Trump as an innocent bystander, or will it show him as Epstein described him in that email? A man who posed for photos with girls in bikinis in a predator's kitchen? The victims are speaking. And they're not asking for sympathy. They're demanding accountability. Victim advocacy groups have called for full transparency, full investigation of every recruitment site, every enabler, every person who looked the other way. They're not interested in protecting powerful men. They're interested in justice. And they've named Mar-a-Lago specifically, called for a full investigation into how the club was used. Who knew, who helped, who profited. Their message is clear. Epstein didn't act alone. He had help. He had access. He had protection. And everyone who gave him those things must be held accountable, including Donald Trump. Especially Donald Trump, because he owned the club. He controlled the access. And he chose to do nothing for 12 years. This isn't just a historical scandal. This is a current political crisis. The Epstein connection has shadowed Trump's entire political career. Opponents raised it in 2016, in 2020, in 2024. And it works because voters care. They care that a presidential candidate was friends with a convicted sex offender. They care that his club was used as a trafficking pipeline. They care about the photos, the girls, the bikinis, the kitchen. And as more evidence is released, the political damage grows. Trump can deny. He can deflect. He can attack the media, but he can't erase the evidence. And if new evidence emerges, if the Donald file is ever released, it could end his political career. Or worse, it could lead to criminal charges. Conspiracy, facilitation, obstruction. The statute of limitations on some of these crimes hasn't expired, and the victims are still fighting, still demanding justice, and they're not going away. Let's be clear, this isn't just about Trump. Epstein's network was vast. Hundreds of powerful men, British royalty, tech billionaires, politicians, scientists, academics. Many are named in the released documents. Many are not. Some have been held accountable. Most have not. The full scope of Epstein's operation may never be known. Because Epstein is dead. Because evidence has been destroyed. Because powerful people have powerful lawyers. But Trump's connection is unique. Because Trump became president, because he wielded the power of the state, because he could have used that power to pursue justice. And he didn't. He stayed silent, protected himself, and left the victims to fight alone. That's not just complicity, that's betrayal. Betrayal of the office, betrayal of the victims, betrayal of justice itself. 180,000 images were released in January. But that's not all of them. Many are still sealed, deemed too sensitive, too private, too damaging. To whom? Not to Epstein. He's dead. To the men in the photos, the powerful men, the men who can afford lawyers to fight the release. And they're fighting hard, arguing privacy rights, reputational harm. But victims' advocates argue the opposite. They say full transparency is necessary, that the public has a right to know who enabled Epstein, who partied with him, who posed for photos with trafficked girls. The legal battles continue, but eventually, more photos will be released. It's only a matter of time. And when they are, we'll finally see what Epstein meant. The photos of Donald and girls, in bikinis, in his kitchen, the evidence that could change everything. This scandal isn't just about individual predators, it's about institutional failure. The Palm Beach police investigated Epstein in 2005. They had evidence, they had victims, and they were overruled. Federal prosecutors took over and gave Epstein a deal. 13 months, work release, no federal charges. The media initially ignored the story, buried it, protected powerful men. And those powerful men, they were protected by every institution: the justice system, the political system, the media, even private clubs like Mar-a-Lago. Everyone looked the other way. Everyone prioritized power and wealth over justice and children. And that's the real scandal. Not just that Epstein was a monster, but that every system designed to stop monsters failed. Deliberately, systematically, completely. So what happens next? The fight continues. More documents are expected to be released throughout 2026. The DOJ investigation into Epstein's network is ongoing. Victims continue to file civil suits against estates, enablers, and institutions. And public pressure is mounting for full accountability, for transparency, for justice. The story isn't over. It's not even close to over, because the evidence keeps coming, the victims keep speaking, and the truth keeps emerging. Slowly, painfully, but inevitably. And when the full truth is finally known, when every photo is released, every document unsealed, every testimony heard, we'll see the complete picture of Epstein's crimes, of his network, and of everyone who helped him, including Donald Trump. Why does this matter? Because this isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein, this is about power, about how wealth and connections enable abuse, about how institutions protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable, about how justice in America depends on who you are and who you know. Epstein trafficked children for decades, and he did it openly, with help, with protection, because he had money, because he had connections, because he had compromat. And when he was finally caught, he got a sweetheart deal, because the system protects people like Epstein. And people like Trump. The victims' fight isn't just about their own justice, it's about reforming a system that values power over truth, wealth over accountability, silence over justice. That's why this matters. That's why we can't let this story die. That's why we keep investigating, keep reporting, keep demanding answers. So what can you do? First, demand transparency. Contact your representatives. Demand full release of all Epstein documents. No more sealed files. No more privacy protections for powerful predators. Second, support survivors. Donate to victim advocacy organizations. Amplify their voices. Believe their testimony. Third, share this information. Don't let the powerful bury the truth. Don't let the media move on to the next story. Keep talking about this. Keep asking questions. Keep demanding accountability. Because the only way justice happens is if we refuse to look away. If we refuse to accept silence, if we refuse to let powerful men escape consequences. The photos exist, the evidence exists, the truth exists, and it's time for all of it to come to light. This is the Epstein Files, Episode 2, The Mar-a-Lago Pipeline. Thank you for watching, and remember, the truth doesn't care about power, it only cares about being told. Like, share, and ring the bell to be notified of future videos. Presented by WordUp Media Network.